As well. The interview will be between two amazing speakers, wonderful conversations to introduce the person coming up on screen. Actually doesn't require introduction, but still we will have to do this. From grade 10, from SSVM World School, Srinika, come on stage. This is your honor. It's a memory of your life to actually introduce our VVIP. Come on stage, Srinika.
Quixotic, obfuscate, sesquipedalian, melange, verisimilitude, sycophantic. Whoa, just saying those words makes my head dizzy. But these are some of the words used by one of the greatest personalities of our time. He's a powerful orator, acclaimed author, and a member of parliament in India. A true polymath, he bridges the worlds of literature, politics, and diplomacy. Very few people are as remarkable as this man, and I know you're eagerly awaiting to hear from him. So, without further ado, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, please join me in extending a grand welcome to the one and only Dr. Shashi Tharoor.
Hello. Hello, Shoma.
Hi, Shashi. I wish we had you here on stage with us.
I wish I could be there till Sunday night. I was expecting that I would very much be on a plane to come to you all, but I've had the most awful gastroenteritis. Even my illnesses seem to have long words, but what to do? It's been terrible. I've had to go to the toilet repeatedly, threw up, vomiting, very, very unpleasant. Had to take an IV drip for 2 rounds, morning and night last night, just to be able to be well enough to speak to you all today, after which I go right back to bed, I'm afraid.
Shashi, you look $1,000,000. So if you look like this when you're ill, we can imagine what you look like when you're well.
It's very temporary. Shaved, showered, and washed just for all of you, and for the wonderful students of SSVM. And I want to thank Mrs. Manimekhalai, Dr. Manimekhalai Mohan, for having organized all this and really having tried her very best to bring me to you. I would so wish I could have fulfilled it, but she would have to imagine my level of exhaustion to get me to say no and keep me away from such a wonderful audience.
So shall I just flow right into it? Shashi, it's fantastic to have you with us, but I just wanted to frame the conversation before diving into the interview. You know, wonderfully, SSVM has framed this session as words and wisdom. And, you know, Dr. Tharoor has just written a book called The Wonderland of Words. And there are 2 beautiful quotes there, which I wanted to share with you. One is from the poet Rumi, where he says, don't raise your voice, raise your words, because it's rain that makes flowers bloom, not thunder. So that again shows you the power of words. And he has another wonderful quote, which is that alchemists, you know, alchemists who turn lead to gold, where he says he's quoting someone who says that alchemists are not those who turn lead to gold, but those who turn worlds to words. And as I was saying earlier, the words we use literally shapes the reality of what we are facing, and how you describe a situation is really the reality of that situation. If something bad happens to you, you call it a disaster, you're overwhelmed. You call it a challenge, you can overcome it. So that's the power of words to change the nature of reality. And language is so important, especially in a country like India. I don't know if many of you know the statistics. We have 19,500 dialects, 780 languages, 120 of those are spoken by more than 20,000 people, and we have 22 official languages. No other country on the planet has this richness and heritage. That's the amount of power packed in there. And Shashi Tharoor is a master of that. One of your students just said he's a sesquipedalian. That is somebody who uses long words. He does that for fun. But in his career as a diplomat, as a politician, he is one of those few public intellectuals and public figures who uses words with care, because he uses words as action. He describes situations, he describes the country, he describes politics in a way that elevates, which allows flowers to bloom rather than to trample. So it's a real honor to be talking with Shashi Tharoor today. And Shashi, thank you for joining us despite everything that you've suffered since yesterday.
Thank you so much, Shoma. Good to be with you. And you read those two quotes from my three epigraphs. Let me read the third one. It's by Pablo Neruda, the Nobel Prize winning poet, in which he wrote, I run after certain words. I catch them in mid-flight as they buzz past. I trap them, clean them, peel them. I set myself in front of the dish. They have a crystalline texture to me, vibrant, ivory, vegetable, oily, like fruit, like algae, like agates, like olives. And then I stir them, I shake them, I drink them, I gulp them down, I mash them, I garnish them. I leave them in my poems like stalactites, like slivers of polished wood, like coals, like pickings from a shipwreck, gifts from the waves. Everything exists in the word. It's such a powerful way of evoking the various ways in which words can be to all of us.
So Shashi, I wanted to start with the fact that really, we had Suhani just doing a fantastic show about magic, but I really treat words as magic. Like I said, it can alter realities. So just to personalize this a little bit, Shashi, where did your fascination for words begin? When did you begin to see it as a tool of power and shaping reality?
In my childhood, Shoma, I was an asthmatic child. And not only was I rather severe asthmatic, it was in the days before inhalers and nebulizers and so on. So all you would get were these very powerful tablets that made your heart beat like a percussion drum, and you couldn't sleep. So I would sit up in bed, barely able to breathe, whole day and night when I was ill, which was at least once a week, if not more often. And what do you do in those situations? I couldn't, there was no television in the Bombay of my boyhood. There was no, of course, no Nintendo, no PlayStation, no laptops, no mobile phones. What there was books. And I therefore started reading precociously young. And because I was the eldest child in the family, started reading my parents' books before I could understand them. But the result was that I read widely and indiscriminately, and I acquired a wide variety of words. I hardly needed to look up a dictionary, because when you come across the same word in three different books in three different contexts, you understand the meaning, the uses, the nuances. And then it helped that my father was a bit of a word nut himself. He had grown up in a Malayalam medium school in a village in Kerala, got to England and essentially taught himself the King's English, later the Queen's, was very, very addicted to words, wrote the most beautiful letters, really, so evocative, so touching. But he also just loved words for the pleasure they gave him. So he discovered Scrabble. And when he moved back to India in 1959, he was desperately looking for other people who knew about Scrabble, which didn't exist in India at the time. And he managed to get a few friends, also basically UK returned, to start playing Scrabble with. They would have weekends of just doing nothing but playing Scrabble. When my sisters and I were born and started growing up, he got us involved in word games. He would write a big, long word on a piece of paper and make us derive shorter words from it, for example. So I, being the older child, had to get words of 4 letters or more. My sisters initially were allowed to have 3 letters and more. So we discovered the fun of words. Sometimes he would give us jumbled letters, and if we could get them all together into one word, then we got a prize, this sort of thing. So word games were very much a part of our family life growing up. He even invented what later got, I suppose, reinvented as Wordle, which is that he would imagine a word in his head and ask us to guess it. The Wordle is much more helpful. It gives you green squares when you get the word in the right place, and yellow squares when you get the letter in the wrong place, and so on. My father would just tell us how many letters we got right in his 5-letter word. And we had to then guess. The whole thing was, words became an object of fun. But I do believe it's important to add one thing. He also taught me that words matter precisely because of what they convey. It's never words for their own sake. Words can be fun for their own sake, but ultimately they matter because your own thoughts are inchoate until you can put them into words to convey them to others. And so using words to embody thought and ideas is what I grew up valuing from a very young age.
I'm so glad you emphasized that, Shashi, because yes, words for fun, words for pleasure. But I wanted to share with the audience somebody that I just interviewed yesterday, in fact, and it pertains to the idea of words. I don't know how many of you know Murlikant Petkar. This is the time of Olympics and Paralympians. He is actually the first Paralympian in India to win the gold. And he was a soldier. He took 9 enemy bullets. He was paralyzed at 19. And then he convinced himself that he was not going to be defeated by that. He did not call it a disaster. He called it a challenge. And he ended up being the first gold medalist of India. He still has a bullet in his spine. It cracked his skull, all of that. But the reason I say this, Shashi, is that when he was a child, his village used to call him Chandu. And that made him so angry, you know, because it was a token name. And he used the power of words. He said, I'm not Chandu, I'm a champion. And he said that when he was 7 years old. And he ended up facing so many hardships, but the word champion was so powerful in his mind that even after he was paralyzed, even when he was in a coma for 2 years, he still ended up living out the dream of the word in his head, which was to be a champion. And Shashi, so that brings me back to you. You wrote your first book when you were 10 years old. It was actually published, you started writing when you were 6 years old. And right through your public life, you've used the power of words. So I actually want to focus on a few words that I think a student community would care about. Let's start with the word curiosity, you know. What does the word curiosity in your own life mean? And can you think of anybody, like I just shared the story of Murlikant Petkar, who embodies the power of curiosity for you?
Gosh, well, I mean, curiosity, of course, is extremely important for kids because the curiosity to learn. In fact, when I'm usually asked to teach children a new word, which is unfortunately the kind of question I don't normally like getting, I always tell them one simple 4-letter word: read. Because if you read, you can develop your curiosity, you can pursue your curiosity in different directions, you can find out so much about the world, and you can learn about it. I think the story that most appeals to me is about the 103-year-old lady in Kerala who got herself.
Sorry, Shashi, I couldn't catch that.
There was
Can you all hear him?
A 103-year-old lady in Kerala who was so curious about reading and literacy that she actually learned to read at that age. She'd never been in school. She'd grown up illiterate all her life, had children and grandchildren. And then her curiosity said, no, I'm going to, it doesn't matter that I may not live to pass my thing, but she'd studied and she became literate and she got a certificate from the Kerala government. Now, this is the kind of curiosity that I think motivates people and keeps it going. When I was in the education ministry as a minister, I remember going to an adult literacy center and coming across a girl who had always wanted, a lady who'd always wanted to study as a girl, but who had been told by her parents, girls don't need to study, you stay at home and work in the house, you look after your brothers and this and that. And she was pulled out after the 2nd grade. And so she had just barely learned. She didn't, of course, retain any of that. And then again, she lived a life that was an illiterate life. And then I met her when we had got these adult literacy classes going in a village. She's in Tamil Nadu, in a place not far from Kanjivaram. And so I asked her, now that you've learned, she wrote her name for me very proudly. And I said, now that you can do all that, how has learning to read and write helped you? And she said, I can't tell you, when I go to the bus stop, I can now read the names of where the buses are going. I don't need to ask anybody anymore. When I go to Kanjivaram town to get anything done, I can read the signs. This, she said, is what has changed my life. And so that kind of curiosity about words and reading has really touched and impressed me in different situations. I think that curiosity is important. It's also important for facts, figures, knowledge, because the world has so much more to offer than we'll ever find out. We should pursue our curiosity to the extent that we possibly can.
So, that's a wonderful story, Shashi. And again, I want to come back to the power of words, and the themes for this gathering is resilience and sustainability. And I wanted you to just maybe talk about the thought of sustainability around words. Earlier, I was being asked, how has the public world of words become corrosive and toxic and poisonous? I was just thinking, for instance, the way we describe people. Let's take America right now. We'll come back to India. but the way Americans would describe Native Americans, the people, the original inhabitants of America, was as savages. And when you call someone a savage, you can just kill them and it doesn't matter. But today, when you call them Native Americans or indigenous people, then you are interested in their knowledge system. You are guilty for having killed off entire people as savage. When you call people anti-national, you don't need to know why they are upset. You can just call them anti-national and put them in jail. So that's the power of words. So I want to come back to you, Shashi, in your public life. And, these are students who are going to now who are going to shape public life and the future of India. How would you interpret the power of sustainability and relate it to words and what's going on in our public life?
Well, look, words are always linked to context, I'm sorry to say. The same thing that if I say to some of you in a conversation in the living room may be understood or heard differently by a mass audience. In fact, I think I'll tell a story against myself because you're familiar with this famous episode when in my very first year, my first months in politics, I was asked during the government's declaration of an austerity drive by a journalist in writing on the social media Twitter, Mr. Minister, does this mean you will travel cattle class? Now, the expression cattle class is very familiar to me and apparently also to the journalist because I'd been living in America for the preceding 3 decades where cattle class is routinely used not to disparage the passengers, but to disparage the airlines for herding us all in like cattle. And what did I do? I replied with sort of typical Stephanian wit. I said, yes, I will travel in cattle class out of solidarity with all our holy cows. Now, I said that and went off to Liberia and Africa on an official visit. It took me 24 hours to get there. And in the meantime, apparently, the dung hit the fan in India. Everyone, even in my own party, was denouncing me and accusing me of elitism and worse, of disparaging economy class passengers as cattle, which of course is not what I had meant. I was just using a routine phrase. But what was interesting was that I remembered at that point Shakespeare's famous line, that the success of a jest lies not in the tongue of the teller, but in the ear of the hearer, which is that when you say something, whatever your intention may be, all that matters is what people think they've heard or are led to believe they've heard. And the result was, especially once the expression cattle class, which is common in idiomatic English, was translated into multiple Indian languages, it really came across as if it was some snooty, sneering fellow insulting the ordinary voters. It taught me a very powerful lesson. A, that words have a power to really hurt, even when no hurt is intended. B, that you have to be careful in Indian public life about the words you use because we're a multilingual polity and words can be translated. And also, of course, that there are people who might enjoy and relish distorting the meaning of what you were trying to say. So you've got to be careful. That's certainly been a very sobering wake-up call in political life, to know that you must sometimes say something differently from the way you might casually do amongst friends who would use the same language. It's very different when you unleash your words politically on a large, vast, and complicated public.
So, Shashi, tell us some anecdote from your own life or, in a really very important world event, it could be about another country or your own, where, like I've been saying, by just describing a situation differently with different words has changed the response to that situation and maybe created a better outcome. So can you share with the students a really important event that was reshaped by the power of words?
Well, I can give you one very famous example, but it's not one which has yet created a better outcome. And that was when the 1967 war between Israel and the Arab countries ended, with the Israelis occupying some territory. And you remember it was compounded in 1973 as well with the Israeli occupation of large areas of Palestine-occupied lands, of Palestinian-occupied lands. At that time, the resolution passed in the UN after intense negotiations with different superpowers and so on agreeing was drafted in English. And the English version said that Israel should withdraw from territories occupied in the conflict. But the French version, because the French always use articles, used an article before the translation of the word articles, and so they of the territories, and so they said that the Israelis should withdraw from the territories occupied in the conflict. Now, this has created a huge international confusion and area of disagreement, because the Israelis and the Americans say that all the word territories implies is Israel should withdraw from some territories, but which territories have to be agreed by negotiation. And what the French version, which is equally authentic in the UN, since both English and French have co-equal status as working languages, the French version implies that if you're vacating, you have to vacate from all the territories occupied in the conflict. So you imagine just the absence of the word "the" in the English version allows people to have one interpretation, and the presence of the word "the" in the French version means that it's a completely different conclusion. And both sides are absolutely wedded to the famous UN Security Council Resolution 242. It's a very important example of how words can actually make a big difference. In my book, I've even written about cases where punctuation has created certain outcomes, where the missing article, for example, is just one thing, but even a missing punctuation mark can change the meaning of a statement. And there is a fairly hilarious exercise conducted by the author Kingsley Amis sometime in the 1960s, which at some point I'll have to find the exact words so as not to confuse the readers, but it'll be fun. I'll share it with you later. Let's go on to the next question, and meanwhile I'll find this.
So I just want to bring it back down to the personal and maybe something that students will relate to, but I hope many of you understood the story that Shashi just said. You know, you're aware of the Israel-Palestine war right now, the way Gaza is being bombed. There's occupation over there. And the story Shashi was saying is just that the word "the" could change the outcome of an entire nation and millions of people, you know, just by the absence or the inclusion of the word "the." That's the power of words.
I won't wait for the Kingsley Amis story. I'll give you another example, which I actually learned in school, and therefore many of the school children here might understand it. It is said that in a co-ed class, the teacher wrote the following words on the board and asked the students to punctuate it. "Woman without her man is useless." So apparently the boys wrote, "Woman, comma, without her man, comma, is useless, full stop." And the girls wrote, "Woman, exclamation mark, without her, comma, man is useless." So you can see how even punctuation can change the meaning of a word, of a sentence.
Right. So, Shashi, that's a good entry point to my next question. I would love to hear from you the power of words in the context of love and of relationships and wooing. So either I'll give you, actually I would love to know one from your own life, when you have used words to woo a woman and succeeded, and when it has boomeranged on you.
I'm certainly not going to go down any personal revelations like that. But there is the famous story of the Brit who was wooing a girl in America and told her, "I'll give you a ring in the morning, I'll give you a ring in the evening," by which he meant he'll give her a call. But the American woman understood that to mean an offer of an engagement. "I'll give you a ring in the evening." And that resulted in a disastrous outcome to the love relationship. So even between Americans and Britons, there can be serious misunderstandings because of the words you use.
Are you not going to get pressured into telling us something from your own life? Maybe from when you were a student, you know, let's not get
Look,
into
what
your
I would
adulthood.
say to the young people here is that words have their place in emotional relationships.
Don't get so philosophical on us, Shashi. Tell
Yeah,
us a
and
story.
certainly writing notes to the boy or girl you like in your classroom and slipping them quietly across can be very beneficial. Though in one case, a friend of mine tried that, and the wrong girl got the note, which created all sorts of awkwardness for him. But these things happen. I just want to say that, however, ultimately, love is not about words. Love is about feelings, emotions, caring, like feeling that the other person's happiness is more important to you than your own. And ultimately, no words can express that fully. You just have to show it through your own actions.
That's wonderful, Shashi, to remind us that even something more elevated than words exists, which is intention and emotion, authenticity, all of that. One other word, I think, which the students and the school would care about, what's your interpretation of it, Shashi? And again, talk to us about your life, because you've also seen lots of ups and downs. The word resilience, what does that really mean for you? And what is your own source of resilience when you've faced a lot of difficult times?
Yeah, that's a very important question, Shoma, because every child in this hall is going to grow up and one day experience some setbacks, because there is no human being who hasn't gone through setbacks. The important thing is not how you actually deal, and not how you actually what you experience by way of a setback. It is how you deal with it, how you bounce back, how you recover, how you actually use your setback to strengthen you for the journey ahead, because there is always a journey ahead. That resilience is so important. I think this, many children in my certainly in my school days would have read the story of Robert the Bruce, the Scottish king, who lost 6 times but kept on trying and finally won on the seventh attempt. That sort of story is often told as, never give up kind of message. I remember my former boss, the UN Secretary General, the late UN Secretary General Kofi Annan, who went through a very, very torrid time when he was attacked on the so-called Oil for Food program, and a lot of false accusations were levied at him. Very unfairly. He was a great, good, decent, compassionate human being who had won the Nobel Peace Prize, and he was being described and treated almost like a criminal. And he was very, very hurt, but he managed to hold it within himself. And I asked him about his resilience, and he said, my father taught me a Ghanaian proverb, which says, when the sharks bite you, do not bleed. And I said, Kofi, I don't understand. When the sharks bite you, you'll bleed. How can you not bleed? He said, one day you will understand what he meant. You have to experience it yourself. And then I came into Indian politics and I found myself undergoing exactly the same experience of being attacked and accused of nameless, unimaginable crimes that I could not possibly have even dreamt of committing, let alone committing. And it was really shocking for me to see this kind of widespread thing. And that's when Kofi Annan's resilience came back to me, and those words. And suddenly I understood what he meant. The sharks bite you to get the satisfaction of watching you bleed. If you show them you are suffering, they have won. They have actually succeeded in penetrating who you are. But if you have a clear conscience, you know who you are, you know what you have done and not done, the best thing you can do is not to bleed when they bite you, to show them that they cannot succeed in deterring you from your course of action. Continue writing, continue making speeches, continue doing your work, in my case, in my constituency, and ultimately truth will prevail, as indeed it did in my case, when a judge threw out all these false charges. But what was very satisfying to me was that when those sharks bit me, I didn't reveal what I was going through, the pain I was suffering. I didn't bleed for that.
That's a beautiful, very powerful story, Shashi. And I don't know how many of you would know that, but Shashi, watching you on television those days when you were really being attacked, it did strike me, that you just never stopped smiling. And it looked almost unreal and surreal that this expression which you have right now actually did not change, and that's like for public record. So a big salute to you for that, really. The shark's bites did not make you bleed,
Thank you so much.
Shashi, I want you to talk about just one other thing before I open it up and let the students also interact with you, is another situation where resilience would matter. This is a situation when you're being attacked for something you haven't done. But in all our lives, there will be times when you actually have made a mistake. You've made an error in judgment. You've done something which has blown up in your life, in whatever scale that might be. In school, it may just be something you've done. You've cheated or you've hurt a friend. How does resilience operate in that situation, and how would you interpret resilience then?
I think that the ability to admit to yourself when you have done wrong is the first thing. Normally people tend to get defensive. Somebody attacks you and says you've done something wrong. Your immediate thing is to defend yourself and find an excuse. Learn sometimes to admit that you have been wrong, that you can be wrong, indeed that everybody can be wrong. admit your mistake and vow to yourself not to make the same mistake again. That's the first thing. Secondly, I think turn to the person you have wronged, if you can, if that person is willing to listen to you, and apologize. I've always believed in the power of apology. To show somebody that you are seriously sorry about something, you go to them and say, "Look, I did wrong. I'm sorry. It'll never happen again. Please forgive me." The person may not forgive you, may not want to listen to you, may not want to, but at least give it a try. Most people, I would say, speaking for myself, most people will be understanding and will excuse you. And finally, show through your actions that you really regret the mistake, not only by never doing it again, but by taking extra care to ensure that you do the opposite of what you did wrong, whatever it was. All the examples you gave. If you've cheated once, don't cheat again. If you've stolen something, I hope it'll be something small that you return it and don't do it again. If you've hurt somebody with your words, not only should you undo it, but you should go out of your way to say nice words to them. It seems to me that these are not difficult things for each of us. If we really vow to ourselves that for us, it's more important to be a better human being than to worry about how it will look that we have actually had to bow ourselves before somebody we wronged.
Again, Shashi, that's fantastic. And I'd just like to share a quick story, again, from the range of people I've encountered. And Shashi, this will resonate with you, that when we are talking about the power of words, we also tell a story about ourselves. We tell a story about the world, we tell a story about ourselves. When we look into the mirror, you've described who you are. Who am I as Shoma? I've made a story about myself, and you spend your entire life living up to that story. Shashi has decided he wants to be a certain kind of Shashi Tharoor. That is a story, that's a power of words. And again, I'd like to share with you a story from Palestine and Israel, because that's so in the news right now. There were two parents. There was an Israeli mother whose son was shot by a Palestinian sniper. And there was a Palestinian man who was actually a militant. He went to jail, he resurrected himself. And then his 10-year-old daughter in a school, she was having a lollipop after school, and she got shot by an Israeli sniper. Now, both these parents could have added to the cycle of hate, but because of the power of words, because both of them wanted to break that, they wanted to apologize. So the Israeli mother actually looked for the Palestinian. She wanted to forgive. And that Palestinian family did not want forgiveness. They did not want to engage with her. And Shashi, she told me such a powerful story. She said, ultimately, my desire to forgive and to break the cycle of hate and violence did not depend on somebody else. It did not depend on somebody even accepting my apology or desire for forgiveness. It's my own story of myself and who I want to be. So this Palestinian father and this Israeli mother have now created something called the Circle of Forgiveness. And they have more than 1,000 parents who have lost their children to war, but who do not, they meet and they create bridges. They've made soldiers meet, and they are increasing the cycle of forgiveness rather than violence. And that all came out of the story that they told about themselves with the power of words.
That's a very moving story. And closer to home, let's not forget that Rahul Gandhi and Priyanka Gandhi have gone to the jail and met the people accused of arranging the murder of their own father and forgiven them. So this is the kind of thing that, if forgiveness comes from within, it's from you. And it's really about who you are and whether you want to nurture hate or whether you want to live in love. And I think that's a very important message the two Gandhi children gave, when I would find it inconceivable to forgive the person who would kill my father. But in their case, they found that in their heart to do.
Yeah, and this is what the mother told me. She said it actually released me. It freed her up, regardless of what it did for anybody else. It made her free. So that was a wonderful story. Shashi, I'm going to ask you one fun question, and then we'll open it up. What is the longest word you know? And I hope there's a short word that you know as well. So
as I said, the short word is read. Long words,
read.
there are many. I mean, the longest one in the dictionary is pneumono-ultramicroscopic silicovolcanoconiosis, which is actually an illness that comes from the inhaling of very, very fine silicone particles coming from volcano dust. And it creates a lung disease, which is called pneumono ultramicroscopic silicovolcanoconiosis. But I would not recommend that there is, I'm sure there is a shorter word for the same illness. The word that I usually have fun with, because it was deliberately made up in the 19th century to be the longest word, and it's not longest, is floccinaucinihilipilification, because that means the act of estimating something or someone as worthless. So I had fun when my publishers released the book, The Paradoxical Prime Minister, and asked me to tweet about it. I thought just announcing my book is now available, please order it, wouldn't make any sense. So I said, this book is more than just a 480-page exercise in floccinaucinihilipilification. And I explained what it meant, that the book is not just dismissing someone, in this case, the prime minister, as worthless. In fact, it's a very serious engagement and study with his life and work. That was the purpose of using that word. But by and large, it's an example I regretted, because little toddlers were obliged by their parents to learn that word. And every time I went somewhere, somebody would wheel out their little child in front of me to tell Uncle floccinaucinihilipilification. And so it became quite an embarrassment, both for me and for them.
Well, Shashi, because you're in a school, without looking at the phone, can you spell that word for us?
Yeah, FLOCCINAUCINIHILIPILI. FICATION.
Oh gosh.
Look it up.
Well, I have no way of marking you because I don't know the spelling of that. So
I
you're
can
gonna-
assure you it's correct.
Well, I was told that this should be for about 50 minutes, and that, you know, the students will be very excited to ask questions of you as well. So let me open this up, and if there's time, then I'll add a few more questions. Hema, do you want, is there a mic going around?
Namaste, sir.
Namaste. What's your name?
My name is Saifana, sir. I'm from grade 9.
Hi, Saifana.
Sir, I would like to know what is the concept behind Tharoorism and how would it reflect in your approach to communication?
I think Tharoorisms are meant to be a joke by people who don't like me very much, teasing me about my language. That every time somebody uses a big word, they call it a Tharoorism. Sometimes it can be done in good spirit. There was a meme going around once that even I enjoyed, which said, I used to think I was poor. Then I met Shashi Tharoor and I realized I'm impecunious, which is actually a clever way of saying, you know, impecunious means the same thing as being poor. But the implication is that if I met Shashi Tharoor, he uses a long word for it. That was a good joke. But they're often very silly things which are nothing really to do with me. Somebody says, some sort of very stupid, sort of lengthy greeting for Diwali using huge, huge words and says, oh, Shashi Tharoor just wished me for Diwali. Well, I'm sorry, I wouldn't wish them that way. I wish them happy Diwali or have a wonderful festival of lights. But the truth is that that's what they do, and they call it a Tharoorism. It's not. Just using big words without meaning is not a Tharoorism. For me, if there is a Tharoorism, it is about actually using words to communicate your thoughts effectively. I, as a writer and as a politician, would not survive if people didn't understand what I was trying to say to them. And so it's extremely important to me that I actually communicate clearly the ideas that I have. And if big words can help convey those ideas, then use them. But otherwise, use the simplest words that people can understand. That remains my principle. And I hope that during this conversation, you've seen that most of the words I use in conversation are words you can all understand.
Yeah. Is there another question? Yes, over there.
Namaste, sir.
Okay, after that, we'll pass the mic to you standing there.
Go ahead.
Yeah.
Hold the mic a bit higher, please.
Yeah. Namaste, sir. I am
Namaste.
Jyotika of
Hi,
grade
Jyotika.
10. Yeah, and I'd like to ask, how do you respond to critics who say your vocabulary is too alienating?
Well, I think if it were really the way they portray it, it might well be alienating. But most of the time, as I just said, I like to be understood. Otherwise, I wouldn't be effective in what I do. Believe me, if I alienated people all the time, I wouldn't have been elected 4 times to Parliament, and my books wouldn't sell to readers. So I would really fail at what I've actually succeeded at. So I would hope that means that I haven't alienated as many people as my critics think I have.
I think that's the point, you know, what he does as a public joke has become something as though it's his description, which it's not, you know. So I think the important thing is about using words with care and effectively rather than long words.
Yeah, the latest Instagram thing going around is what I would say to a girl to persuade her to be nice to me or whatever. And it's so silly. No girl who knows me has ever heard me speak like that to her. But these are the kinds of things that people are saying. If Shashi Tharoor were out on a date and then they would use lots of long words, silly. I don't do that.
I did ask you to give us your romance tricks, but you didn't, Shashi. You would have put the record straight on that.
Well, I've now put the record straight. That's it.
There was a question there, the boy in the green jacket. Oh, okay.
Yes. So wishing you a speedy recovery. This is Shirley,
Thank you.
teacher from Velamal.
Hi,
And
Shirley.
my question to you is, sir, you've given your speeches in a lot of prestigious institutions and all of that, but not everybody knows that you've tried your hand in stand-up as well, which was incredibly amazing. But how did you convince yourself to get onto the stage and try stand-up comedy though? And how did your knowledge of words help you there with that as well?
I'm a bit of a risk taker, I must admit. The first invitation to stand-up comedy came when I think Amazon Prime was doing a special where they wanted to, quote unquote, invite celebrities to pair up with established comics and do stand-up comedy. And they invited 5 or 6 people. There was an actress, there was some, I think, fashion designer, there were sort of people in different professions. They invited me as the politician. I'm afraid the others didn't seem to work out very well because I certainly haven't heard about them ever again. But mine kind of went viral and it's still there out on Amazon Prime. And I said yes because it was that very safe period that happens between the casting of the votes and the counting of them. This was the 2019 elections. So you don't know whether you won or lost, and you are at a loose end. You're still the MP, but with no real responsibility since you can't do anything. And you're not yet sure whether you won or lost. So you feel slightly irresponsible. And I said, let's do this and let's try it. But I had a lot of fun doing it. Some professional comics helped me. And at the end of it, I think I did about slightly, maybe 1.5 times more than they actually broadcast. All the very political jokes that were also perhaps they felt less desirable after Mr. Modi's thumping victory, they deleted. But most of what they kept were the non-political ones, and those were quite amusing, I hope, and you can still find it on Amazon. Then, when I was at the Jaipur Literary Festival a couple of years later, there'd been a long hiatus at COVID, during COVID, and the Jaipur Literary Festival at the British Library resumed immediately after COVID in 2022 or 23, I can't remember now, 22, I think. They asked me, 22, they asked me whether I would do a stand-up comedy to end the whole festival with. So I did one about the whole COVID experience and about being in London because it was the British edition of the festival. And that is also available more freely on YouTube. You don't have to be a member of Amazon Prime for that. But I'm not going to do this too often, Shelley. My position is very clear. Rarity makes it more appreciated, right? So if I do it too often, it'll become, they say in Hindi, "Ghar ki murgi dal barabar." It's the chicken you see in the house all the time is just like routinely having dal. That's what the Hindi walas say. So I don't want my jokes to become routine.
Yes. You wanted to ask a question.
Yeah.
Where happened to the green jacket, Shoma?
Ah,
there
yes,
he
the
is.
green.
Hi, sir. Greetings, sir.
Hi.
Yeah. So I wanted to ask.
What's your name?
Jeremy. I'm from Rue Continum.
Hi, Jeremy. How are you?
I'm good, sir. How are you?
Good. Not well. I could be better, but I will be better soon, God willing.
Yeah, that's nice to hear. Sir, since you're very well read, what is one of the authors that has impacted your writing the most or had a great effect?
Yeah, I read very widely, and therefore there are a lot of authors I would have to mention. The author that gave me most delight I remember who kept me sane when I was 12 years old, and my father, just 38, had a very bad heart attack and was battling for his life in a hospital. The only way I could keep my mind off just going crazy with worry and pain was just reading P.G. Wodehouse, because his world was something you could escape to, completely unconnected to reality, but a lot of fun, extremely hilariously plotted and brilliantly written, with a stylistic competence that very few writers can match, where he used very literate English to great comic effect. I would still recommend the works. They're timeless. He died in 1975, 50 years ago, and he died at the age of 94. So he really lived a long life, published 95 books himself. But every one of them is a delight to read, and I would recommend him very strongly. But everyone has different tastes, and I have multiple tastes. So I've enjoyed the Latin American magic realism of writers like Gabriel Garcia Marquez, who wrote 100 Years of Solitude, which I would recommend to all of you, or Maria Vargas Llosa, whose Aunt Julia and the screenwriter is a lot of fun, as well as being very high literature. I've read the American writers, people like John Updike and Philip Roth, modern American fiction. If you go to England, there are some very impressive, serious writers. In fact, I've acquired a couple of books of Hilary Mantel, who won 2 Booker Prizes, but I still haven't found the time to delve into them because of my political life. But she's very highly spoken of. There are the Russian writers. There's people like Mikhail Bulgakov, and of course, everyone knows of Chekhov and Tolstoy. So there's a lot of amazing writing available. The East European writers who wrote under Soviet oppression were particularly courageous and interesting writers. And of all those, I would recommend 2. One is Milan Kundera, who wrote The Unforgettable Lightness of Being, and The Book of Laughter and Forgetting, both very powerful. They're not light, but they're very easy to read, very lightly written, short, accessible, very powerful books. And there's an Albanian writer who just passed away called Ismail Kadare, whose books are again thinly veiled allegories of communist oppression and rule in his country. So there's a lot you can pick from, and to pick any one writer would be invidious on my part. I've already left out many that they didn't come to mind when I was speaking, but which I've read and enjoyed and appreciated. So read widely. My only advice to all of you is to read. I almost don't care what you read, because if you read good books and bad books, inevitably you'll be able to tell the bad books from the good books, because you'll know what works for you and what is powerful and effective or humorous and clever, what engages you, what doesn't engage you. All of that will come across to your own writing. And I hope you'll read me too.
I was just going to say, Shashi, that would you name some from India, writers that you've really enjoyed who are of Indian origin?
Again, very many of them. I love Arundhati Roy's God of Small Things. I've enjoyed many of Amitav Ghosh's books, particularly his fiction. I've really enjoyed Upamanyu Chatterjee's English August, his very first book. Vikram Chandra, who wrote some very powerful novels, Red Earth and Pouring Rain. There's a writer called Manil Suri. There's so many others, and there's still young people coming up and writing novels. I'm not even sure I can keep up with all of them, but there's some very, very good writing coming out of India. And I again want to stress, if I've left somebody out, it's by accident probably. Atish Tasir, and there's so many other good Indian writers who've given us so much to read. I would say to people, go to a bookshop, pick up a book, browse through it, and then see. Because of my political life and my current responsibilities, I'm reading much less than I used to. But I got particular delight in reading Salman Rushdie's last novel, Victory City, which was a retelling in his own magic realist fantasy style, which you've seen in Midnight's Children and other books, of the whole story of the Vijayanagar Empire, which people in the south of India will relate to very well. So I would urge you to read Rushdie's Victory City amongst the new books.
You've been wanting to ask a question.
Namaste, sir. I'm Lakshna from grade 11.
Hi, Lakshna. Okay. Big girl.
So I have a question for you. Your words have impacted a lot of people. How has others' words impacted you, or their words or their comments made an impact on you?
Yeah, I was just talking about the impact that some of those writers made on me. Woodhouse certainly taught me the great importance of words, of how to use words effectively. Uh, Not just the actual words you use, but the way you arrange them, the way a sentence begins, ends, all of those have an impact. The way the use of language to evoke hilarity or humor or laughter in a reader is no small feat, and that I got from Woodhouse. I've rarely had time to read thrillers in later life, but as a youth, I read a lot of thrillers, and one of the things you learn from thrillers is how to end a chapter in such a way that a reader wants to go on to the next chapter. Many of these thriller writers, Agatha Christie or any of them, James Hadley Chase, there's so many of them. They are masters of the art of hooking you and keeping you hooked by making sure each chapter ends at some exciting point and you want to read on to find out what happens next. That's a very good trick of writing.
But
Then,
Shashi, I
yeah,
just thought that maybe, what you were asking, correct me if I'm wrong, is to say that one is in literary terms, but also you just mentioned Kofi Annan's words, which really impacted you, but are
yeah.
there any others whose words may have shaped you and who you
Oh,
are?
I see what you, yes, you're quite right. I may have misunderstood her question. Yeah, Kofi Annan had a profound impact on me because he was such a fount of really timeless wisdom. I'll tell you something else he said, which was both clever and deeply insightful. Again, quoting his late father, who may not have said all this. When I asked him about, there was a particular member state that was being difficult towards us. And I said to Kofi, your Secretary General, why don't you just denounce them for what they're doing or what they're saying? And he said with a smile, my father always taught me, never hit a man on the head when you've got your fingers between his teeth. Now think about that for a minute. If your fingers are behind somebody, between somebody's teeth, and you hit him on the head, what will happen to your fingers? They get bitten off, right? And what he meant was, as Secretary General, I am dependent on this powerful member state on the Security Council on a whole host of issues. If because of this issue I upset them, they could bite my fingers off. Very, very clever thought. And so sometimes, the words embody an idea that actually influences you seriously in life.
Yes, you've been wanting to ask a question.
It's also about thinking through the consequences of anything you say or do,
I'm not a student of this great SSVM school, but I'm always your student, Shashi. You know me well.
Hi, Kuryachan, yes.
Hi, Shashi. I just wanted to convey this as more through this session of yours. All these youngsters are seldom smiling, but as Shoma said beautifully, you keep smiling in your ups and downs. I've been seeing this. What are the small techniques, one or two techniques you will tell this young crowd here, the youngsters, the students of this future India, great India, how to keep smiling and be successful?
Well, first, I think, is to believe in yourself. If you have faith that you know what you are and that you will not let others define you by their accusations and criticisms, you will define yourself. You are the owner, the master of who you are. That is the first and most important conviction you must have in your life. Secondly, to be anchored in yourself. That is that not only must you know who you are, you must be rooted in that and try not to let yourself down. I think some of the people who try and fail may be trying to do things they're really not equipped to do. Not everyone can win the 100-meter dash. Not everyone can come first in the maths exam. Not everyone can sing a beautiful solo recital. Each one of us has different talents. Sometimes we may have more than one talent. Sometimes we may have, but we all have some talent or the other. Our talent might simply be that of bringing a smile to the face of the person next to us, of providing a shoulder to a suffering person to lean on. Whatever those talents are, know your talents and strengths and develop them to the fullest and be true to yourself. If you never let yourself down, you will find you don't let the world down either.
That's a great note to end on. Thank you so much, Shashi. I think we're going to launch your book now, which you would have loved to do in person, but
Wonderful,
we'll do this
yeah.
virtually. And I'm going to let you take over.
What a wonderful session. Thank you so much, Dr. Shashi Tharoor, sir. Thank you very much. In your illness, you have spread so much of wellness and the words of wisdom as always. Thank you very much. Round of
Very
applause,
kind.
and thank you, Madam Shoma, as well. Thank you.
Thank you. We managed an hour instead of 45, and I'm very happy to have been
We
there
have one
for it.
question. Sir, the demand for you is always there, virtual or in real. We have one more question for you. So if you can just answer that for us, please, sir.
Yeah.
Thank you, sir.
Hello, check, yeah. Hi, sir. Dr. Kanan Girish, I had met you when you were HRD minister. And
Oh my
we had
God.
a lot of conversations at that time. So my question is very simple. When you were a HRD minister, you had a lot of initiatives you wanted to do and, you know, a lot of nice things you had spoken about. Today we have the National Education NEP has come. Now the National Curriculum Framework has also come. What is your opinion about the current system of education right now? Is it the what you had envisioned when you were HRD minister that's happening right now? And second question is, if there's something that you would love to change or something that you would love to add on to today's system, what would that be? Thank you.
That's a vast subject, Dr. Kannan. I think we'll have to have a whole different session for this. It's impossible to give you a superficial answer because the issues are so complex. To begin with, the national education policy affects both school education and college education. And I think some of the reforms in college education are actually quite welcome, particularly adding flexibility, allowing students to take multiple courses. There's a lot there that I like. In school education, there's some things I welcome and some things I'm very concerned about. I'm not at all satisfied with the idea of getting Anganwadi workers to teach literacy because many of the Anganwadi workers are not particularly educated themselves by definition. I'm not at all happy about the decision to allow schools to share facilities with schools up to a 30-kilometer radius away, because in practice, no school that doesn't have a playground is going to take their children to a playground 30 kilometers away every day. It won't happen, and this will just be a paper exercise to allow schools to function without adequate standards. Then there are some facilities which sound good on paper, but I worry about the practice. For example, when the Prime Minister says a child should be able to learn music and mathematics at the same school, probably true. But remember that mathematics, you need a mathematics teacher and a blackboard and a standard textbook. But music, you will need a music room or rooms. You will need different teachers with different instruments. You will need different people who can actually impart the right skills. And all that costs money. Who's going to pay for it? Is the government going to raise its budget sufficiently to subsidize all these innovations? Or are we going to make education more and more confined to the rich, where the parents will have to subsidize all this extra education because the schools will simply pass on the extra costs to the parents? And I worry about all of that because I want education to be of excellent quality, and it would be wonderful if every school could offer both music and mathematics. But then government must help provide some of the resources for all of this so that people are able to get benefits of all these enlightened innovations and actually benefit from them. But this is a very thin and superficial reading of a much more larger topic. We'll have to have a separate seminar on that one day, Mr. Kannan. I'll come back to all of you one day, maybe next year, for all of that.
The questions can go on, the answers will never stop, but the show also will go on because we have something very, very interesting lined up. It is an exclusive launch here at SSVM. Very often at home we hear this word, watch your words. Sometimes in politics we hear war of words. But today with Sir we understood to weave with words. It was absolutely fantastic. Thank you so much, sir.
Thank you.
As we move on, his latest book, it's around the word in 101 essays. That's how special it is. A Wonderland of Words. His latest book will be launched exclusively here at SSVM School. It would have been great to have Dr. Shashi Tharoor right with us, but he's still very much here around. His vibe, his words, his feel is right here. So if I can request the management to please come on stage, please. Clap your hands. What a wonderful session this was. Thank you, Madam Shoma. You need to stay on stage. We will not let you go. We have more direct questions to ask you because Coimbatore wants to know. Coimbatore wants to know. We will talk to you about it. Please come on stage. Bring the books out. A Wonderland of Words. And to receive this book, we've got few very special students of SSVM. First up to receive the exclusive launch edition of this book, we have from Ru Continuum, Kriya, a grade 11 1B board, completed 500 books. He's read 500 books before grade 5. He received an exclusive edition of A Wonderland of Words. And then from SSVM World School, 2 young kids who've actually published their books. Can you believe it, at this young age, publishing their books? Atharva Tirumalaisamy has read 400 books and published a book called The Robo Apocalypse. Atharva, please come on stage. And the twin sibling, Diksha, as well, has published a book called The Lost Key. Grade 6 SSVM World School, they receive exclusive editions of A Wonderland of Words. Congratulations, you have a lot to read. You have some great words to Google. Thank you. Round of applause. This is a book you'll all must pick up, must read. 101 essays is what it has. If I may request Dr. Mani Meghalai, ma'am, if you can just your final words to Dr. Shashi Tharoor before he goes.
So thank you, Dr. Shashi Tharoor. From yesterday evening, we have to say that we were keeping our fingers crossed that you should recover early. And yesterday when I spoke to your personal secretary, Sunuk, I told him, even I'm ready to send a charter flight because our children are quite eager to listen to you, because today language plays a vital role, especially English. And today's young generation, they use a different style of speaking language, that is English, like WRU, where are you? So in such scenario, people like you can be a big transformation for this youth. And I thank you with all the struggles you had given your time to come on a Zoom and enlighten our children with your beautiful message. And we are delighted to launch your book, A Wonderland of Words. It's a marvelous one, and it's a big privilege for us. Thank you. Thank you very much. Yes, you have.
Thank you so much. Thank you for those very kind and generous words. I'm afraid I'm going to have to go straight back to bed after this, but I will go with my heart full of your kindness, and I once again apologize that I couldn't be there in person. I can see I would have really enjoyed it, but this was the best substitute I could offer. Thank you so much for your kindness, and once again, really appreciate this opportunity to interact with your lovely, wonderful students. Good luck, all of you kids.
Thank you.
Thank you. May I be
Thank you very much, sir. It's been an honor. Absolute honor. Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks, Shoma. Thanks, Mani Meghalai. Thank you all. Bye.
Thanks, Shashi. Thank you so much. I think you gave us a lot to chew on, and we wish you a very speedy recovery. But like I said, you're always smiling, so we really can't understand that you're unwell right now.
I am, believe me, the energy levels are zero battery right now.
No,
Heading to
thank
bed.
you so much,
Take care.
Shashi. Bye.
Thank you. Take care. Bye.